Hello and welcome, I'm your host, Sensei Pong. To get all the legal junk out of the way, I'm required to let you know that this version of Gwent, the Witcher card game I'm playing, is a closed beta. Since it is a beta, there are going to be your usual problems that may arise. So keep that in mind if my game footage seems a bit choppy. Also that my computer isn't great, despite being a PC enthusiast, so if there's any lag, don't expect that in the final product if you decide to pick this up for yourself. With that out of the way, let me just say, even with a potato pod with computery things all plugged up inside it, Gwent runs surprisingly well. Visually, it's appealing, but it should be noted that once more that this game is still in its beta state, so any card artwork may just be placeholders until the final product is released. But, what is Gwent and how do you play? Firstly, let's line the differences that sets it apart from most competitive trading card games. In most trading card games, i.e. Magic the Gathering, Hearthstone, Pokemon, etc., oftentimes than not, you've got a creature, minion, a bunch of them little buggers, or whatever that is, acting as your fighter or army, actively attacking and dealing damage to wherever you deal damage to. Normally either your opponent's creatures or in most cases your opponents themselves. Either way, there are differences with each game of course, but creatures you control have been a reoccurring norm for most CCGs. In Gwent, however, it's quite a bit different and for myself very compelling. With Gwent, it's not really about the damage you're able to deal, as a large majority of the cards don't actively attack. Where the core gameplay builds upon is specifically building and arranging your side of the battlefield as an army, and whoever has the most powerful army at the end of the round wins the round. The best player, 2 out of 3 rounds, wins the game. It almost feels like a game I've played in the past, but I can't seem to put my finger on it. I'd say a competitive 2-player solitaire, but this is nothing like Spite and Malice. Only because your side of the battlefield in some respects is kinda like a tableau in solitaire variations. Gwent is just more complicated and diverse than any competitive solitaire could ever be, due to its TCG elements. Then again, in a sense because of all the point-taking, table-building, combo possibilities, it's a bit more similar to trick-taking trump games, kinda like Pinochle, Cribbage, Forms of Rummy, or even Whist. Man, I feel old just knowing those games. Of course, Gwent carries more variations and depth than those. Regardless of all that, because it's not creature-centered like many TCGs, but all about the layouts and planning, the strategy of the cards allows it to play out closer to the skill level of the players themselves, just because you, at face value, have better cards in your deck and are better at deck building than your opponent, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win that easily, at least from what I've noticed. If you make bad decisions throughout your game, like overplaying your first match or not compensating for your later strategy options, chances are you'll lose the match. Of course, obtaining good cards and utilizing them well is essential. If you know how to use them right, creatively or optimally, at that point, you have the clear advantage. Because of the nature of the strategy used in Gwent, it almost feels like a chess game of sorts, where each move does mostly matter, but if given the option, workarounds and smart play do have their benefits. So, despite being drastically different than most TCGs I've played in the past, Gwent is a breath of fresh air, and because of its solid style of overall gameplay, I warmly welcome it and feel like it's a competitive card game I can invest my time in, without it getting stale. Of course, again, this is a beta, so balancing issues are subject to change, hopefully and probably for the better. So, for the basics of Gwent, each player has a personal deck of anywhere in between 25 to 40 cards. At the beginning of the game, each player draws 10 cards. There's also a playable character card that acts as your faction leader. Each playable deck can only have one faction leader, and that's what they play as. These faction leaders can only be played once in a full game and have their own unique actions and benefits, similar to a Pokemon GX move, or just regular OP card in Magic. Once the initial 10 cards are drawn, the mulligan phase begins and each player is able to redraw up to 3 cards in their hand, and once that is over, actual play is able to begin for round 1. Each turn each player is only allowed to play 1 card. Rounds end when each player passes or is forced to pass when their cards run out. A player that passes is not allowed to play any more cards, so if the other player decides to keep using their cards they can, up until they pass, for whatever reason that may be. Of course, there are some cards that allow for summoning, etc. So playing 1 card doesn't necessarily mean just 1 card, it can be a group. I can have a card that summons a weather effect and 2 extra minions, etc. The cards remaining in your hand at the end of the round stay in your hand, and at the beginning of the second round, each player draws 3 cards. Then the second round begins. The flow over rule applies once more at the end of the second round, and if a third round is started, each player then draws 1 card at the beginning of the round. So, 10 cards in the beginning, with an option of swapping out 3 of your cards in round 1. Draw 3 for the start of round 2, then draw 1 for round 3. And yes, this does make it so that the second and third round are normally shorter than the first, for if all cards have been used by the end of the second round, including your leader cards, the third round starts with just 1 card on each side. At that point, it's a luck of the draw, or a gambit for whoever thinks they'll draw a good card for the last round. If you can imagine this mechanic, in most cases, unless a player has cards that allow for extra summons or card draws from their deck, yes, you essentially have a limited amount of cards in your reserve to play, so careful usage of your cards throughout the game should be taken into consideration. As I said before, in some cases, overplaying your first round could be disastrous for the overall outcome of the match, and because of this mechanic, you're forced as a player to possibly plan out strategies for your second and third round. Because of this, when I get my opponent to pull out all their stops in the first round, it feels great. Yes, I lost the first round, but now I've got them on the ropes for both the second and third, and because of this gambit, I win the match. Of course, it should be noted that this is a card game, so unless a deck is built poorly to where it happens more than it should, bad opening hands will occur. That's a given. So the basic common sense rule of smaller decks being easier to manipulate and larger decks having a greater level of RNG applies. Now, these are just the basics. There are cards that change up the gameplay for each player from time to time, from some decks being draw heavy, others based around weather mechanics, which I'll explain later, extra creature summons, damage, buffing, etc., and so on. This offers varied and deeper gameplay for anybody wanting to be creative with their decks. Cards vary in factions, similar to Magic and Pokemon's elements or Hearthstone's classes. At the moment, there's only 5 factions. Never being a Witcher player beforehand, these cards and classes probably mean more to you than me. I just like card games, give me a break. There's the Monsters faction, Elf and Dwarfy faction, the Norse Viking looking fellows, some sort of Albion Knights of the Round Table, and possibly evil Sneaky Snake dudes? I don't know. They're heavier on the spy cards than other factions, so I'm only assuming. There's also a good amount of neutral cards that can be played into any deck faction. I'm assuming those guys are the Witchers. See, I know what I'm talking about, get off my back. Some notable points outside of the gameplay of rounds that should be noted is that there doesn't seem to be any deck caps for custom decks, which is cool. Make as many custom decks as you like, bro. I'm looking at you, R.A. Ungrown, maybe tight, but 18 still don't settle my feelers, bro. Booster packs, or in this case card barrels, come with 5 cards each, 4 random cards and 1 special rare card that you can choose from a choice of 3. The fact that each booster comes with less cards than almost all TCGs out there doesn't bother me too much, but an extra card wouldn't hurt. The reason for one less than Hearthstone not bothering me too much is that the rare special card isn't a fully random draw. You get the option of choosing 1 of 3 rares. This, I feel, gives power to the player themselves in deciding what special card better suits their decks and playstyles. So yeah, that's tight. Of course, it sorta sucks when you get 2 or more great cards, but are only able to choose 1 of them. Either way, it's an interesting booster system that sorta makes up for its lack thereof. The price makes sense in the game shop for boosters, despite only having 5 per pack, but this leads me to one small complaint I have with the beta. Card crafting, merging materials seems to be given out relatively decently as well as in-game currency, but it is less giving than most TCGs out there. Of course, this is a beta though. Bloody hell, I feel like a parrot repeating myself. So this is probably subject to change, or at least I would hope it will change in the future, either with or before release. Some changes I would personally like to see would probably include dailies versus incentives like Pokemon, or even one-player campaigns. Of course, like I said before, they're probably going to add this during the later beta phase or public release. I believe at the moment what the beta is for is to test server structure and multiplayer, card balancing, and other game mechanics and programming. Card incentives seems like something that would probably come later once a better grasp on the game itself is established. So I'm not too worried about the whole matter really, just happy that I'm able to play the game in its closed beta state. Back to the game mechanics, something I really enjoyed is the ability to add and take away weather mechanics. As far as I know, in the front line melee row there's Frost, in the mid-range lane there's Fog, and in the back row siege lane there's Downpour. Unless a unit has weather resistance, the cards in those lanes are dropped to a strength of 1, so any extra damage a damaged card may deal will destroy it. Or, if that weren't to happen, the overall strength of the affected player's side is lowered. Certain cards, as I said, are resistant to weather effects, so sometimes with careful deck building, a deck based around debilitating your opponent can be effective. There are also some cards that completely benefit from weather effects, adding extra elements to the overall gameplay of one player's deck. Foglets from the monster faction, for example, are all suddenly summoned when fog appears in mid-range lane, then adding ancient foglets get buffed by 1 point for every turn fog is in the battlefield. If there's a good amount of ranged units on your opponent's side that don't have weather resistance, using this strategy can easily tilt the strength of the round in your favor. It's overall pretty sweet. These weather mechanics add a nice level of depth, regardless of the faction you choose to play. But again, it's still too early to really give a good review of Gwent, since it is in beta. Bloody hell, I feel like a parrot repeating myself. Either way, I like what I see and I like it a lot. Matches don't last super long, but the matches offer enough thought to feel satisfying, even when you lose. Despite the game still being in beta, bloody hell, I feel like a parrot repeating myself, any balance issues are still being worked on as I speak, but regardless of that, only a small handful of the games I've played felt like I've had no control over it. Outside of that, it was my own fault in not playing wisely. Gwent the Witcher card game at the moment doesn't have a set release date for the public. If you do know the date, please leave a comment down below, that'd be cool, because I'm interested, and I'm sure some of you out there watching this video are curious as well. I believe though, Gwent is set to release as a free-to-play game for Xbox One, PS4, maybe, and of course PC, maybe Mac, maybe Linux, I don't know, later this year, following the form of most free-to-play TCG models. Personally, I'd like to see a Switch release as well, because with that, I could play anywhere I want, and in the bathroom as I rethink my life decisions and Taco Bell. Either way, keep an eye out for this one if you like TCG games like myself. It's freaking awesome, and as far as I can tell, will only get better with time. Again, as I said before, I'm legally obligated to tell you that this game is still in its beta form. Bloody hell, I feel like a parrot repeating myself. Enough of that! If you'd like me to make more videos with Gwent, like deck building, let's plays, strategies, and possibly how to play videos, leave a comment down below, like, subscribe if you're new, follow me on Twitter at sensei_pong, maybe Facebook, I don't know. Just don't slippity slap that diggity dislike button. Ew. That really came off better in my head. I promise not to do that again. In the meantime, I mean to pick up and see what both Feria and Cross Maga are all about. Man, there's just too many good card games coming out recently, and as an OG Dofus Wakfu fan from way back when Sacriers were still new, feel ashamed that I haven't fully picked up Cross Maga. Anywho, thanks for watching. Sensei Pong signing out. So, sometimes with careful deck building, a deck based around it's overall pretty sweet. These weather mechanics add a nice level of death. No. A nice level of death. These weather mechanics add a nice level of death. It's overall pretty sweet. These weather mechanics add a nice level of level of depth. Say it right. It's overall pretty sweet. These weather mechanics at a nice level of